Lena lived on the quiet edge of Greenfield Colony, a small farming settlement on a peaceful planet called Orin 3. Her home was simple, a small wooden house, a wide barn, and fields that stretched far into the distance. Life was calm, slow, and sometimes lonely. She spent most days planting crops, fixing broken tools, and feeding her animals. She liked watching the sky at night. The stars were brighter here than anywhere else. Her parents had passed away years ago, and Lena had learned to live alone, but sometimes, when the wind blew softly and the stars twinkled above, she would talk to them like they were old friends. One evening, just after the orange sun dipped behind the hills, something strange happened. As Lena sat on her porch, sipping warm tea, a bright flash lit up the sky. It wasn't a shooting star. It was something bigger. A streak of fire tore through the clouds, heading straight toward the forest near her fields. She stood up quickly, heart pounding. The object hit the ground with a loud boom, and a faint tremble reached her feet. Smoke rose in the distance. A crash, she whispered. She grabbed her coat, a flashlight, and her old field bag. Her heart told her not to wait. She had to see what had fallen. Her boots crunched through dry leaves as she followed the trail. Into the darkening meadow, past her cornfield, and into the edge of the forest. The smoke grew thicker. The air smelled like burned metal. After a short walk, she saw it, a strange ship, half buried in the ground. It was silver, smooth, and unlike anything she had ever seen. The surface shimmered faintly, and small lights blinked along its edges. Part of it was cracked open, and steam hissed out from inside. Lena's breath caught. She moved closer, careful not to make noise. The door to the ship had been forced open by the crash. She peeked inside and gasped. There, lying on the floor, was a figure. He looked human, but not exactly. His skin was pale with faint silver lines, like gentle patterns running along his arms and neck. His hair was dark and soft, and his face was peaceful, though clearly hurt. One eye was swollen. His clothes were torn, and blood darker than human. Blood stained his side. Lena's hands shook. She had never seen anything like this before. But instead of fear, she felt something else worry. This man or being needed help. She stepped inside slowly. His eyes opened. They were bright blue. Not like the sky, but deeper, glowing faintly, filled with emotion. He didn't speak. He just looked at her. She expected fear or anger, but she only saw pain. And calm. "I won't hurt you," Lena said gently. She didn't know if he understood, but she said it anyway. The alien tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "No, don't move." Lena knelt beside him. "You're hurt. I'll help you." He blinked once, slowly. Then, to her surprise, he raised a hand and touched her arm gently, as if saying, "Thank you." Lena knew she couldn't leave him here. If the colony patrols found this crash, they would take him away, maybe even study him. She didn't trust them not. With something like this, "I'll take you home," she whispered. With effort, she helped him stand. He was taller than her, but weak. He leaned on her shoulder as they walked slowly back through the trees. Each step was hard, but he didn't complain. He didn't speak at all. By the time they reached the barn, the sky was full of stars. Lena opened the side door and led him inside. She placed soft blankets on a bed of hay in the back corner. It wasn't much, but it was warm and hidden. She helped him lie down. He groaned softly but gave her a small nod. "I'll bring water," she said. He looked at her again, and something in his eyes made her pause. There was no fear, no anger, only quiet trust. Like he already knew she would protect him. Lena stood up, heart still racing. She didn't understand what was happening, or who he was, or where he came from. But she knew one thing for sure. He had fallen from the stars, and now he was in her barn. And for some reason, she felt like he was meant to be there. The morning after the crash, the world felt different to Lena. The sky was clear. Birds sang softly, and sunlight warmed the barn roof, but her heart was restless. She had an alien in her barn, one who had looked at her not with fear, but with quiet trust. She moved carefully through the house, filling a bowl with clean water and gathering a few bandages from an old first aid kit. She added a piece of bread and fruit to a small tray. Then she walked toward the barn, her steps slow and careful. When she opened the wooden door, the soft smell of hay greeted her, and so did his eyes. He was awake, sitting against the barn wall. His wounds still looked painful, but he had managed to wrap part of his arm with cloth from his own clothing. When he saw Lena, his eyes lit up. No smile, no words, just a calm gaze that somehow said, "You came back." She set the tray beside him. "Here," she said gently, "food, water." He looked at the bowl and took it slowly. He sniffed it first, then drank with both hands like he had been thirsty for days. He paused before tasting the bread, but seemed to enjoy the fruit more. It was strange to see something so human in someone so different. "I don't know your name," Lena said softly. She sat down a few feet away from him, her back against a haystack. He looked at her, then touched his chest lightly. "Taran," he said in a deep, quiet voice. Lena smiled. "Taran, okay, I'm Lena." He tried to repeat it. "Lee. It sounded right enough. She nodded. Taren, looked around the barn, then up at the ceiling where sunlight streamed through a crack. He raised a hand and pointed at the sky. Lena followed his finger. "Home?" He nodded once. She took a deep breath. "You're far from home." He didn't answer, but something in his eyes said he knew that too well. Over the next few days, Taran stayed hidden in the barn. Lena visited him often, bringing him food and helping clean his wounds. He didn't speak much. His voice seemed weak, but his eyes spoke plenty. He listened carefully, watched her hands when she worked, and even helped her fix a broken fence near the barn once he felt strong enough to walk. One afternoon, while Lena repaired an old tractor outside, she turned and saw Taran watching her. From the barn door, the wind moved his dark hair gently, and the silver lines on his skin shimmered faintly in the sunlight. He didn't speak, just stood there, looking at her like he was trying to understand something about her. "You shouldn't be out in the open," she warned gently. "The patrol might see you." Taran stepped back inside, nodding slowly. But before he did, he reached out and handed her something small, a glowing stone the size of a coin. She looked at it in surprise. It was warm in her hand, with a faint light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "What is it?" she asked. Taran pointed at it, then at her chest. He said a word she didn't understand, then touched his own chest. His eyes were serious but kind. Lena didn't understand the meaning, but she knew it mattered. She nodded and placed the stone carefully in her pocket. That night, as the stars filled the sky again, Lena sat beside Taran on the barn roof. She had spread out a blanket, and they both leaned back, staring up. Taran lifted his hand and pointed to a group of stars that twinkled brighter than the others. He drew shapes in the air, almost like showing a map. "Is that where you're from?" Lena asked. He nodded again. His face softened, and his voice came quietly. "Naren," Lena repeated it softly. "Naren." Taran smiled faintly for the first time. It was small, but it made Lena's heart flutter. She had never seen anyone smile like that, so tired, so far from home, yet full of something peaceful. She lay back and stared at the stars. "Do you miss it?" she asked. Taran didn't answer. Instead, he turned his head and looked at her. His eyes held something more than just sadness, something deep, something unspoken. It wasn't just about missing his world. It was about being here now, with her. And in that moment, she realized something strange. She didn't want him to leave. She didn't know why. She barely knew who he was or where he had come from. But every time he looked at her, it felt like He was trying to tell her something she couldn't put into words. Maybe it was the way he noticed small things. How he gently helped the baby goat that limped in the corner of the barn. How he fixed the old windmill with tools he barely understood. How he never tried to run, never tried to hide from her. He just stayed, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And as they sat under the quiet night sky, shoulder to shoulder, watching the stars that had brought him here, Lena felt her loneliness begin to fade little by little, like morning light chasing away the dark. The days passed gently after the crash, but Lena knew the peace couldn't last forever. Every morning she checked the sky for signs of trouble. Every night she watched over the barn before going to sleep. Turin was healing. The bruises on his face were fading. The silver lines on his skin seemed to glow more with each day. He was stronger now. Sometimes he helped her with small chores, cutting wood, moving heavy boxes, or fixing things with strange tools from his damaged ship. But something had changed outside her little farm. One afternoon, as Lena walked to the market square in town, she noticed the soldiers. 3 patrol trucks were parked near the central road. Men in gray uniforms stood talking to the colony leader. They were armed and serious. A large screen was set up on the back of one truck. It showed an image of Terran's ship burned and broken in the forest. Below it, the screen flashed red words: "Unidentified intruder, report any sightings." Lena stopped in her tracks. Her heartbeat raced. A soldier looked her way. She quickly turned and walked toward the produce stalls, pretending to search for carrots. Her mind was spinning. They were looking for Taren. Back at the farm, Taran was in danger. She didn't buy anything. She hurried home, keeping to the side paths. When she reached her house, she went straight to the barn. Taran was there, sitting near the open door, fixing a broken tool. He looked up and saw her worried face. "Taran," she whispered, "they're searching for you. The patrol is in town." Taran stood slowly. He didn't seem afraid, but he looked at her with calm understanding. He had known this moment would come. "We have to be careful now," she said. He nodded and followed her deeper into the barn. Lena moved some boxes and opened a hidden trapdoor in the floor. It led to a small, underground space where she used to store winter supplies. "You can hide here if they come," she said. "No one knows about this place." Turin looked at the space, then at Lena. His eyes were thankful, but there was something more, something like sadness, as if he hated the idea of hiding. That night, the sky was quiet, but Lena couldn't sleep. She sat on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. After a while, Taran stepped outside and sat beside her. She spoke first. "Why are they afraid of you?" Taran looked at the stars for a long time before answering. "Fear comes easy." His voice was soft, a little clearer now. He had learned more of her words. "Slowly but surely, I came. Not to harm." He added, "But they see a stranger." Lena nodded. "They don't understand." Taran turned to her. "You understand?" Lena looked into his eyes. "I'm trying." They sat in silence after that. The wind was gentle, and the night cricket sang a quiet song. The next day, Lena made a plan. She would keep Taran out of sight during the day. He would stay inside the barn or the hidden room, only coming out at night when it was safe. She also taught him more words. Each evening, they sat on the barn steps and practiced. She pointed at things and said their names. "Sky," she said, pointing upward. "Sky," Taran repeated. "Tree, tree." Sometimes, Taran would teach her words. From his language, too. They were soft and musical. She struggled with them, but he smiled when she tried. One evening, while they were talking, the dog started barking. Lena stood quickly. "Someone's coming." Taran disappeared into the barn and down the trapdoor without needing to be told. Lena closed the door and placed the boxes back. 2 minutes later, a colony patrol truck rolled up her dirt road. It stopped in front of the house. 2 soldiers stepped out. "Evening, Miss Lena," one said. "Sorry to bother you," Lena smiled politely. "Is something wrong?" "We're just checking in. There was a crash nearby. We're looking for anything unusual, strange sounds, lights, movement." "Have you seen anything?" Lena shook her head. "No, nothing like that." The soldier looked past her toward the barn. "Mind if we take a quick look around?" Her heart skipped. But she kept calm. Of course, nothing to hide. They walked through the barn, shining their lights. Lena stayed close behind them, making sure they didn't go near the trapdoor. The place was clean. Turin had hidden all signs of himself. After a short search, the soldiers gave a nod and walked back to their truck. "Thanks for your time," one said. "Let us know if anything strange happens," Lena nodded. "I will." When the truck drove off, she waited until it was out of sight before running back to the barn. She opened the trapdoor and whispered, "It's safe." Taran climbed up. Slowly, his eyes asked the question. "They're gone," she said. "But they'll be back." Taran looked at her for a long time. Then, he reached into his small bag and pulled out a piece of metal part of a broken machine. He turned it on. A faint blue screen lit up, showing strange symbols and blinking lights. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Signal," Turan replied. "My people. Maybe they hear me." Hope and worry mixed in Lena's chest. "Will they come?" Turan looked at the screen, then at her. "Yes, soon." Lena felt a strange ache in her heart. She had protected him, cared for him, and now he might be leaving, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, she sat beside him again as the stars filled the sky. Taran's signal device sat on the barn floor, blinking gently every night. Its soft blue light filled the quiet darkness. Lena would often sit beside him and watch it, her heart full of both hope and sadness. Each evening, Taran would adjust the small machine. He never complained. He worked silently, carefully. Lena didn't understand the symbols on the screen, but she understood what it meant. Taran was trying to go home. One clear night, something changed. Taran sat outside the barn under the stars, the signal machine in his lap. Lena brought him a blanket and sat beside him like always. Suddenly, the blue screen turned green. A soft hum filled the air, and a small line of moving symbols began to flash. Taran sat up straight. His eyes widened. He pressed a button. The machine gave off a quiet sound like a song made from wind and light. "They heard you," Lena whispered. Taran looked at her. His face was full of wonder and something else. Relief. He nodded slowly. "They come." Lena smiled, but inside, something tightened in her chest. He had done it. His people would find him now. It was what he wanted, what she had helped him do. Still, she couldn't stop the quiet ache inside her heart. Taran stood and looked up at the stars. He pointed to the same cluster he had shown her many times before. "Naren," he said, "my home." Lena stood beside him, staring at the stars. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Taran looked at her, his blue eyes shining in the starlight. "You, kind, you help." She looked at him and smiled. "Of course I did." There was a pause. Taran reached into his bag and pulled out a small square device. It looked like a mirror, but when he pressed the side, it lit up and showed a moving image, a planet full of silver trees, glowing rivers, and tall blue mountains. "This, my place," he said. Lena's eyes widened. "It's like a dream." He handed the device to her. "Gift." She held it carefully. "For me?" He nodded. Lena felt her chest warm with emotion. "Thank you." Over the next few days, they prepared for his rescue. Taran said little but worked fast. He cleaned and fixed parts of his ship that still worked. He used tools Lena didn't understand, but he always explained with his hands and eyes. One evening, they sat on the roof again. The stars seemed closer now. The signal machine glowed beside them. "I'll miss this," Lena said quietly. Taren looked at her. "Miss?" Lena placed her hand on her chest. "When someone leaves, the heart feels empty." Taren watched her face for a long time. Then he touched his chest in the same way. "I miss too." They sat in silence. Words were few, but the feeling was clear. The next morning, the signal machine began to blink fast. Taren ran his fingers over the screen and nodded to himself. He turned to Lena. "They come." "Tomorrow." Lena froze. "Tomorrow?" He nodded. Again, sun. Down. It felt like the air had stopped moving. Lena smiled softly. "You'll go home." Taren stepped closer. "You safe here?" She nodded. "I'll be fine. I always am." But her voice didn't sound strong. Taren noticed. He reached out and gently took her hand. His fingers were warm. "You not alone," he said. Lena looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. That evening, she cooked their last meal together, warm soup and fresh bread. They ate in the barn with the lantern glowing above them. Afterward, they sat by the door, watching the night sky for signs of a ship. Lena broke the silence. "Will I ever see you again?" Taren turned to her. "I don't know. Maybe ... Yes." She nodded slowly. "I'll wait, just in case." Taren touched the small glowing stone he had once given her. It still pulsed with light. He pointed at it. "This call I hear." Lena stared at the stone in her hand. "You'll hear it, even from far away?" He nodded. She smiled through her sadness. "Then I'll keep it safe." The stars above grew brighter. The signal machine gave off. A soft sound again. It was almost time. Taren stood and looked into the sky. Lena stood beside him. A streak of light moved across the stars. It grew bigger, brighter. A quiet hum filled the air. From the sky, a silver beam slowly touched the ground in the meadow beyond the barn. Taren stepped toward it. His eyes were calm, but his hands shook slightly. Lena walked beside him to the edge of the field. They stopped where the light touched the grass. The wind was soft and everything felt still. Taren turned to her. He placed both hands on her shoulders. His blue eyes met hers. They said everything he couldn't speak. Lena blinked back tears. "Go home. Be safe." Taren slowly stepped into the beam of light. His body began to rise, but before his fingers let go of hers, he looked at her one last time. And his eyes said, "Stay," even as he let go. The silver light faded from the sky, and the night turned quiet again. Lena stood in the meadow, staring at the empty air where Taren had disappeared just moments ago. Her hands were still warm from where he had held them. The last thing she remembered was his eyes so full of something deep, something that stayed even after he was gone. She didn't move for a long time. The stars above were still bright. The wind gently moved through the tall grass, but Lena felt like the whole world had gone still. He was gone. She had helped him. She had kept him safe. And now, he had returned to his world, but a piece of her had gone with him. Slowly, Lena turned and walked back to the barn. Everything looked the same: hay in the corner, tools on the shelves, the blanket folded where he used to sit. But it felt different now. The space felt empty. She saw the small device he had left for her, the one that showed the moving images of his home. She picked it up and pressed the side button. The silver trees swayed in the wind. The blue rivers flowed between hills. The sky above that strange planet was filled with soft light and distant moons. It was peaceful, beautiful. Taren's home. Lena smiled sadly. "I hope you're happy," she whispered. She placed the device gently in a box, along with the glowing stone he had given her. The soft pulse from it was still steady, like a quiet heartbeat. She held it close for a moment, then tucked it away. The next few days passed slowly. Lena kept busy fixing fences, cleaning the barn, tending the crops. But everything felt different. The work didn't feel as important. The silence around her felt heavier. She missed his quiet presence. She missed the way he watched the stars. She missed his gentle voice, his careful hands, and his thoughtful eyes. At night, she still sat on the roof and looked at the sky. She kept hoping she would see another streak of light. But nothing came, only stars. Only silence. People in the town stopped talking about the crash. The patrols left after a week. No one had found anything. No one suspected Lena. To them, the strange visitor was just a mystery that had passed. But Lena knew better. She had seen his ship. She had held his hand. She had let him go. One morning while checking the barn, Lena saw something strange. The signal machine Tareen had used was blinking. Again, she picked it up and stared at the screen. A line of symbols moved slowly across it. Then, to her surprise, a word appeared, one she could understand. Stay. Her heart jumped. She didn't know how he had done it, or if it was meant for her, but somehow, it felt real. It felt like him. She held the machine close and sat down on the floor. Her hands trembled. Did he miss her too? Did he feel the same ache she felt? She didn't know how to answer the message. The machine was not built for talking back. But she placed it beside the glowing stone and whispered, I'm still here. Days turned into weeks. Then months. Lena slowly returned to her quiet routine. The sadness didn't go away, but she learned to carry it. She started writing things. Down memories of Taran, things he had said, drawings of his world. She made a small notebook full of words and pictures. It helped her remember. One evening, as she sat under the stars, she opened the notebook and flipped through the pages. There was a sketch of Taran's face. Simple lines, but enough to show his gentle eyes. She traced the drawing with her finger. I hope you're safe, she whispered. The glowing stone in her pocket warmed slightly. She smiled. Maybe he was thinking of her too. One day, while cleaning the field, Lena found something half buried in the soil. It was a smooth metal shard, part of Taran's broken ship. She cleaned it and placed it on her shelf. It was small, but it meant something. Proof that it had all been real. Sometimes she wondered what he was doing now. Was he flying across the stars? Was he telling his people about her, the girl who had helped him on a quiet little planet? Maybe, or maybe he had forgotten. But every time Lena looked up at the sky, she chose to believe he remembered. She chose to believe that his eyes, the ones that had said, stay, even when his hands let go, had not forgotten her. And that, maybe, one day they would meet again. 1 year passed. Lena had grown stronger. Her farm was blooming again. The barn was full of life, animals, tools, and light. But every night, she still climbed to the roof with the glowing stone in her hand. She still watched the stars. And she still whispered his name, Taran. Some people wait a day, some wait a lifetime. Lena didn't know how long she would wait, but she knew one thing for sure. She was not alone. Not in her heart. Not in her memories. And not in the stars. Lena's life moved forward, step by step. The seasons changed on Orin 3. Spring warmed the earth, and flowers grew again along the edge of her fields. Birds returned to the trees, and the days grew longer. But even as life outside her home bloomed, Lena still carried a soft emptiness inside her. Taran was gone. Months had passed since that last night in the meadow. Still, his presence lived quietly in every corner of her farm. His blanket remained folded in the barn. His tools, the ones he had touched and repaired, were still in the wooden box beside the hay. The glowing stone stayed close to her heart, tucked into a small pocket of her jacket. It never stopped pulsing, always soft, always steady, like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Lena didn't cry anymore. Not because she stopped feeling, but because she had grown used to the silence. Her sadness had become gentle, like a shadow that walked beside her. She kept busy during the day watering her plants, fixing broken fences, harvesting crops when the time came. The animals knew her voice. The wind still carried songs across the hills. But at night, when the stars appeared, she always stopped her work and looked up. She would whisper quietly, "Good night, Taran," before going to bed. And sometimes she thought she could feel his eyes watching her from far away. One evening, after finishing her chores, Lena sat on the porch and opened her notebook. It was the one where she had written everything about Taran, his words, the shapes of his world, the star path he had pointed to again and again. She turned to a clean page and began to write. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I miss you. The sky feels colder without you beside me. I still keep your gift close, and I still remember the look in your eyes before you left. It said more than words ever could. I hope your world is kind to you. I hope you smile when you think of me." She paused, then drew the small cluster of stars Taran had pointed to Naren, his home. She stared at it for a long time. The next morning, Lena received a letter from the town. The colony was starting a new research project, one that involved studying old languages and signals from other star systems. They were asking for volunteers to help decode messages. It was a new idea. Not many people were interested, but Lena's heart stirred. She remembered the words Taran had taught her. She remembered the signal machine and its strange sounds. Maybe she could help. Maybe this was the next step in her journey. That evening, she made her choice. She packed the small device Taran had left behind, along with the glowing stone and her notebook. She took a deep breath and walked down the road into town. Lena met the colony's research team. They were surprised when she showed them the items from her farm, especially the device from Taran's world. At first, they asked questions, curious, but polite. She only said, "It came from someone I helped." They respected her silence. She joined the decoding project. Her job was to study star signals and try to find patterns, shapes, words, symbols. Most of it was quiet, slow work. But Lena had patience. She had learned that from Taren. She often stared at the blinking screens and soft sounds coming through the receivers, wondering if something familiar would ever appear. And then, one day, something did. It was late in the evening when it happened. Most of the team had gone home. Lena was the only one still working, sitting quietly at her desk. A new signal came through, a soft sound, not loud, not strong, just a pulse, a rhythm. She turned up the volume. The sound was slow and familiar. It reminded her of the glowing stone. It had the same calm beat. Her heart began to race. Then symbols appeared on the screen, strange at first, but slowly. They began to shift. The machine translated one word, just one, in her language. "Stay." Lena covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. She had seen that word before. It was the same message Taran had sent months ago, but now it had come again. She saved the signal and copied it to her notebook. She stared at the screen and whispered, "Taran." Was he trying to speak again? Was he thinking of her? She didn't know, but she knew it wasn't a dream. He was out there, and somehow he still remembered. After that day, Lena worked harder in the decoding room. She asked for more hours. She studied more symbols. She even started teaching herself other alien languages, hoping one of them might lead her to something more. The research team respected her dedication. They often asked her how she was so patient, so focused. Lena always smiled and said, "I'm just waiting for something special." At night, she still walked back to her farm. The barn still stood quietly. The animals still greeted her. But now something was different. She had a purpose. She had hope. She knew that even if she never saw Taran again, their story was not lost. It lived in the stars, in the words, in the silent light that crossed the galaxy. And most of all, it lived in her heart. A full year had passed since Turin left. Lena's life had changed in quiet but meaningful ways. She still lived on the same farm, fed the same animals, and walked the same paths through the fields. But inside her heart, everything was different. She wasn't just a farmer anymore. She had become something more. Each day, she worked at the colony's new research center. She helped decode signals from distant star systems. She studied patterns, sounds, and messages, always listening, always searching. And at night, she walked home under the same star-filled sky, holding the glowing stone in her hand. The stone still pulsed gently, like a tiny voice reminding her, he's still out there. One evening, just as the sun began to set, Lena climbed up to the roof of her barn. She had done this many times before, but this time felt different. The air was cool, the wind soft, and the sky so clear it looked like glass. She lay back on the roof and stared at the stars. For a long time she said nothing. She just watched. And then as the stars twinkled quietly, she whispered, "Turin, can you see me?" She closed her eyes. She remembered his voice, slow and soft. She remembered his hands, gentle and careful. And she remembered his eyes, the way they spoke even when his lips stayed still. He had said so much with just one look, and now she held that memory like treasure. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed in the distance. At first, Lena thought it was wind. But then the sound grew clearer, a soft hum, like a whisper in the air. She sat up. In the sky above the meadow, a light appeared. It wasn't a star. It was moving. Slowly. Steadily. She stood and stepped down from the roof, her heart racing. The glowing light drifted lower, stopping just above the field where Terran's ship had once crashed. Lena walked toward it, barefoot, through the cool grass. As she reached the center of the field, the light changed. It opened like a flower, and inside it, she saw a shape tall, calm, and familiar. It was Taren. He stepped forward from the light, his blue eyes glowing softly in the darkness. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, Lena smiled. "You came back," she said. Taren nodded. "You stayed," she nodded too. "I told you I would." There were no more words needed. He stepped closer. His hand reached out, and she took it. It was warm. Real. He looked just the same, strong, calm, full of quiet light. But there was something new in his eyes now. Something deeper. He had crossed the stars for this moment, for her. They sat together in the meadow under the starlight, just as they once had. Taren spoke more clearly now. He had learned more of her language. "I told them about you," he said softly. Lena turned to him. "What did you say?" "That a human helped me," he replied. "Not with machines, not with power, but with heart." She smiled. "And what did they say?" "They listened. Now they want to understand, like I did." Lena looked up at the stars. "Maybe one day more of us will meet." Taran nodded. "Yes, but for now, I wanted to see you." Her heart ached again, but not from sadness. This time, it was full. Taren handed her a small round device, smooth and silver. "This," he said, "is a pathstone." She turned it in her hands. "What does it do?" "It shows the way," he said. "To Naren." Her breath caught. "You mean I can come with you?" Taran looked at her carefully. "If you choose. Not today, but when you're ready." Lena stared at the pathstone. So many thoughts filled her mind. Her home, her farm, the stars. And then she looked at Taren. He wasn't asking her to leave everything. He was offering her a door, a choice, a future. That night, Turin stayed beside her. They talked until the stars faded into morning. When the light returned to the sky, it was time for him to leave again. But this time, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like a promise. He stepped into the soft light, his body surrounded by the glow of his ship, before he rose into the sky. He turned and looked at her. And once again, His eyes said everything. They said, "You're not alone." They said, "I will come back." They said, "You are part of my world now." And Lena smiled, because she understood. Later, as she walked back to the barn, the pathstone still warm in her hand, she looked up at the morning sky. It was quiet again, but her heart was full of stars. She whispered, "I'll see you soon." Then she opened her notebook and wrote, "He returned, just as I believed, his voice still soft, his touch still warm. And in his eyes I saw the same light that first told me to stay. I waited, and I will wait again. Because now I know love can cross galaxies, and silence can carry more meaning than 1,000 words."